Holy cow, welcome back to another Boxscore Geeks show. We are back with a special guest, Jeremy Britton, and a story of a curse. So today we're going to be talking the 76ers and Ben Simmons, maybe. I mean, we've talked it to death, but it's been a while. Bill Walton, because, as topical as that can be. And of course, since we have Jeremy here, the ultimate Warriors fan. Sorry, Brian, you have been demoted this show.
That's fair.
We're, of course, going to be talking Warriors. And then if we get to the end, we might talk a little small sample size theater, because I don't know if you know this, 4 games into the NBA season really isn't enough time to tell you anything, except the Warriors are undefeated. So, of course, another title's coming your way, right?
Oh, yeah. I'll tell you everything.
I'll let Jeremy say, hey, introduce. As Brian noted, I think way back in the day you've been on the show, but yeah, we haven't really had a great booker, which is me, in a couple of years. So Brian actually took it upon himself. So I'm glad you're back.
Thanks, Trey. Thanks, Brian. Yeah, long-time listener. I thought I was like a first-time caller here, but yeah, I guess it's been
on a couple times at least.
In another lifetime.
You've written some pieces as well, right, for the various websites.
Way back when, yeah.
And then, of course, as always, our producer, voice of God, man of many hats, Brian Foster. And by the way, funny note, I've actually hijacked this Twitch channel since you've been away, Brian, to use it to stream video games, which hasn't had some popularity. There are a couple of people in the chat. So if anybody's actually watching and wants to ask a question in real time, Brian can watch and pass that along. What I did want to say is I actually have a canonical reason as to why the show has been on hiatus for so long. You might think COVID, a lot of us work from home and get burnt out. We've been kind of ships passing the night, Brian, right? I'll be able to go one night, you won't. You'll be able to go one night, I won't. The real reason, though, was after our last show, you said, hey, I'll tell you what, let's record the next show as soon as this Ben Simmons drama is resolved. And we said, sure. And then it turns out Daryl Morey tried to say that's going to take 4 years. So we had to break rank.
See you in 4 years, Trey. No.
But we had to break rank because of that. But that is the official reason the show's been gone for so long, is that Ben Simmons hasn't gotten settled. I don't, I wrote multiple pieces at nerdnumbers.substack.com on it, why it's a horrible trade. I got to laugh at Jeremy getting optimistic at the Warriors that might actually bite. When, by the way, similar, this happened last year with Chris Paul, and then it happened this season with Ben Simmons, where it's like, Nuggets might be interested. And I was just like, no, I'm not even entertaining for 1 second. And I have no idea what the heck is going on at the moment beyond Ben Simmons is kind of refusing to play. And it would be possible to say he might be shrewd and savvy. I'd actually like your opinion, Brian, because you've had similar good takes on other situations where we see a player and an owner come head to head. And I'm like, oh, is the player playing 4-dimensional chess? And you're like, I think this. I have no idea what's going on with Ben Simmons. Do you have any read?
I do. Actually, I'm going to refer to Arturo on this, who had a point I agreed with. What he says is basically so go back to the end of the year for them last year, right? They lost in the playoffs. They lost in a Game 7. We have this, Ben Simmons actually didn't have a terrible series. His scoring wasn't great, as we know historically now. The rest of his game, was okay. His defense, his ball distribution, is all that. But he has this terrible play that's infamous now. He didn't take the shot. They lose the game, and then everyone piles on him, right? Doc Rivers piles on him. Embiid piles on him. All, maybe if not at the post-game press conference, then within days of after them losing, right? It's clear it's time to go. So what's Arturo's point here is the minute that happens, you have to say, me, Ben Simmons, and my agents, team of agents, they're ruining my value, and there's no way I can stay here. I have to get out. I have to force my way out as soon as possible because I am playing for my next contract now. And people say, well, he's under contract for 4 years. Well, if he plays for the 76ers this year and gets buried, it's bad for him. So yeah, I agree with that point. The team is clearly, they're stiffing him, so he can't play for them again. He's got to force his way out.
Okay,
yeah, and I would.
Okay, add something. I was looking back into this too, and I think like you said, Brian, everything seemed to focus on that passed up dunk, right? And that pass and how he wasn't scoring, but like it actually trailed back into, I think, Doc Rivers' arrival. And I think, Dre, you had made this point early on where Doc Rivers said Ben finally understands his role, but it was clearly a slightly lesser role, right, throughout the whole season. And you could just kind of see his confidence like kind of waning a little bit. And then the free throw trouble started like late season. I think it was late in the regular season and carried into the playoffs. And you could see a guy who was just in his own head, right? And he really lost confidence. And I think he associates that with Rivers. He associates that with the Sixers. And that's a really great point. And playing for his next contract, he's got to be thinking, I got to get out of here.
Can I add one thing to that, Dre? Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, there's no quick fix. So it's not just one moment.
And just to add to that, I mean, Ben Simmons, they're saying, oh, he's immature. He's in his own head. I mean, he's not taking the leadership role or whatever is what other people are saying. And, it's, he's 25 years old. Maybe he is immature. Doc Rivers is the coach. He's been around the NBA for decades. He should be the leader here, working him through this, not just throwing him under the bus in public. I guess these days it's a lot harder to keep things in-house probably than it used to be. But they did not make any effort at all.
Yeah.
And to Arturo's point, Kawhi might be like the start of this, which namely is after the decision with LeBron James, the NBA front offices sewed up what used to be a loophole, which was the sign and trade. So what used to happen is if a player like LeBron James wanted to leave their franchise but still keep the franchise tag, they would do a sign and trade contract with their old team. So he did a sign and trade with Cleveland. Cleveland then traded him to the Miami Heat. And in fact, that was somewhat beneficial to Cleveland because instead of losing him for nothing in free agency, they got back some picks or whatever. So that used to be the old method of how these things happen. After the decision in the lockout, that was sewn up in the CBA, which said no more sign-in trades, which actually means if a player like Ben Simmons, LeBron James, I would say younger, let's say Giannis Antetokounmpo, Ben Simmons, if they want a max contract, and Kawhi is a great example, if they want a max contract with the squad, they need that squad to have their bird rights, which means the only way they get onto the squad that has their bird rights is by demanding off. So Kawhi actually did this first, where he was willing to sit out a year. And I was kind of shocked because normally when a team with the money and a player play chicken, the player inevitably loses. Kawhi was the first one where that broke, and Ben Simmons might be the second where it's going, it's funny because it's exactly what you're saying, Brian, right? The CBA is going to have another boost. The next TV deal is going to come and it's going to go up a little. I think what Mike Conley at a brief period of time had a $150 million contract that was the most lucrative ever at the time. And that's only gotten exceeded. So the next contract Ben Simmons signs, if it's for 5 years, could be upwards of 200 million at least. So if he wants that and wants to be in a good spot, and then, as you're saying, seeing the writing on the wall of going, if my value declines here and the only team with my bird rights is the 76ers, and they try and stiff me 10%, which doesn't seem like that much, but 10% of 200 million is 20 million. That's a lot of money. And the good example we've used in the past is Derrick Rose. Derrick Rose, by getting the MVP on his rookie contract, was eligible for a max contract, actually named after him, the Derrick Rose rule, which was 1 extra year on his contract. And he got injured. That 1 extra year was worth, I think, 20 to 30 million. So I am sincerely hoping that that's right, because obviously this has turned very wrestling. We see lots of drama. But anyway. Let's get on to some other stuff. I think this is just preaching to the choir, Jeremy, but fun. I wrote a piece on Bill Walton, and this is something you and I enjoy together, which is looking at historical NBA. And it's funny because I will never be the person that says, oh my goodness, the game used to be so much better back in the day. However, I'm going to turn into an old man very quickly and go, oh my God, the analysis of the game used to be so much better back in the day. And I'm going to actually let you talk. I'm going to show you something on air potentially. So I'll let you talk, and I might have something cool to say based on that point.
Oh, here we go.
He's getting a prop.
And nobody said anything. But cool. Good job covering. So, I love this about Zoom, by the way. So watch this.
Oh, your chroma got you.
look at this book. That's an invisible book on Zoom. Let's see if I put it next to my head. Does that show up? So that's
not scientific basketball. Oh yeah.
So Jeremy brought this up because I was at one point complimenting Lee Mead in the ABA, which well, look, some of us have like a cool cop. Does yours have crayon drawings in the opening? Because mine does.
Awesome book.
But this book is from copyright 1949.
Yeah.
So this book is before the NBA. And a lot of the possession points, basic strategies, etc., are in here. I get to turn this into basketball on paper, Jeremy, and say I haven't actually read it all the way through it, but it's been on my bookshelf for a while. But the basic point is the ideas about basketball have been around forever. And I think the major shift, and I kind of brought this up in Bill Walton, and you and I have said this back and forth a lot about each other, is the old NBA, I think the people that were judging it were basically coaches and players. And when we flipped the switch and basically asked media to write quick pieces and highlights and, top 10 plays, is where the shift has gone. So, I mean, we do get to sound very get off our lawn old people and say, like, people don't have attention spans anymore. But I think the bigger issue is the audience for the content and the content being created is not conducive to actually being concerned about the underlying dynamics of basketball, which they've known since the beginning.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's interesting in that book too, like you mentioned, he's actually complaining then in 1949 about how people primarily only pay attention to scores and don't pay attention to other facets of the game. And what's interesting about him, the guy who wrote that was the coach for the Oregon Webfoots. It was the Oregon University Ducks now. I guess Webfoot meant Navy SEAL. It wasn't, and then later it became Duck or something. It was kind of interesting. But
Interesting.
he was the very first coach and won the very first NCAA championship in 1939. Had a run and gun team and also the first really tall team they called the Tall Furs. So he was sort of a pioneer in both pushing like the tempo and the pace of the game, introducing outside shooting, but then also putting a 6'10" center out there at a point when nobody had anything like that. They're all maybe 6'2", 6'3" at the tallest. So, and that book actually describes basically, as far as I can tell, the invention of the box score, the shooting chart, proposes a bunch of new rules, including the home run of basketball, the 3-pointer, the shot clock. It goes on and on and on. And he explains why he was trying to like improve people's understanding of the game, which is pretty cool. Understanding and like enjoyment of the game, and so he wanted to kind of push it forward. So it's a pretty cool snapshot, but everything in it holds up to today. It's like we haven't learned anything in about 70 years. It's pretty crazy.
It's obviously Dave Barry is one of the people we talk to a lot on the show, and he's made this comment multiple times: basketball is basketball is basketball. And that's I mean, that's the nice thing, right? Is the rules are 1 is worth 1, 2 is worth 2, 3 is worth 3. Getting the ball is important, keeping the ball is important. There are variations to those, like the zone defense as an example, right? That changing up some dynamics. But what's funny is the relative value of a player's box score has not shifted throughout the history of the NBA. And that's actually like the thesis of my Bill Walton piece. Is I basically went, I'm not going to argue that Bill Walton wasn't great. Quite the contrary. Now I'm going to say this is an argument you and I get into all the time about all-time greats, Brian. And unfortunately, I think Bill Walton fails for both of us. Let me ask you just straight up, Brian. Would you put Bill Walton on your top 75 NBA list? If you
not enough longevity, too many injuries. Yeah.
Well, and even that's the other funny thing is, even in his great seasons, I think he never exceeded 2,000 minutes played. He managed to make 80 games played with the Celtics, but that's because he was coming off the bench. So this is a guy that was never managed to play starters minutes for a reasonable amount of time in an NBA season more than once. He did have an MVP season, but the Nugget homer and me, I think there were 2 Nuggets. I think Bobby Jones and one other player, they were really good. There were 2 Nuggets that I would have put above Bill Walton that season for MVP. And then, of course, Kareem was on the list. And then one of our favorites, Adrian Dantley, would have been the top MVP.
He should have made the top 75, Dre.
Adrian Dantley. Yeah. So if Adrian Dantley and Alex English didn't make the top 75, it means the most efficient scorer of the 1980s and the volumist, right? Alex English has the most points in the 1980s. Adrian Dantley is the most efficient when you factor in shots taken and shooting efficiency, which is remarkable because he did it without threes. I don't get it, but he did. There you go. Neither of them made the list, so whatever, right? But just he did put up an MVP season, but that's it. But like he doesn't have 6 seasons of greatness. And when I in this piece, what I just basically said is I was like, 1978 Bill Walton wouldn't sniff the modern day MVP list But the key is what he did in 1978 is just as valuable back then as it is today. And the easy counterpoint I had is 2011 Bulls. They had Joakim Noah. He's a passing big. He wins. I don't think that year, but he does win Defensive Player of the Year. Great big. The Bulls are the best team in the NBA because they are they are the number one defensive squad in the NBA, and they give the MVP to Derrick Rose. So I'm just like, Bill Walton doesn't get the respect of the modern NBA. He would never make the top 75 list if he had started playing 1980 or later.
Can I ask you a question about Bill Walton, which is how did you rate those earlier seasons right before 1980? Is there any possibility he had a ton of blocks or steals in those seasons?
Oh, interesting. So I will say we don't have it on the box score Geeks, but you can officially do wins produced completely, so to speak, 1974 on. Where it kind of gets a little fuzzy is in wins produced, defensive and offensive rebounds, as you noted, are different, and blocks and steals are important. So what you are capable of doing before 1978, but to 1974, is you can basically give those values to the team level.
Right.
And then this is, of course, this is a mistake, not a mistake, but just understanding a weakness of the model in those seasons. We are just going to distribute those team by minute, the value of the blocks, the steals, the defensive rebounds at the team level, and give them out to the players. Bill Walton was still really good, but I mean, he just, I think he didn't win Rookie of the Year because he only played 35 games. His second year, I think he only played 50 games. So it's just one of these cases where per minute, he's a great player, but neither Brian nor Dre, I think, would put him in first ballot Hall of Fame beyond just, I've said before, you could put every NBA player first ballot Hall of Fame and I wouldn't have a complaint.
Just real quickly, it's worth pointing out how much harder it is to be top 75 than Hall of Fame, right? Normally we say Hall of Fame, but top 75 is really good. Anyway, sorry.
Was he
that
injured in college, though? I know you guys usually include college when you talk Hall of Fame, right?
Oh, yeah, interesting.
Well, he's Hall of Fame for sure just as a broadcaster, right? No matter what he did as a player, he's Hall of Fame, in my opinion.
He looked pretty healthy in college, just at a glance.
Oh, but fun, like this old era, right? We kind of have to use shots or rebounds as a proxy.
Yeah.
But I mean, he was recording upwards 400 to 500 rebounds. Oh, this is interesting, Jeremy. So in his last year at UCLA, I noticed his rebounds go down by 100 from the year before.
Yeah.
And his shots go down by 80. So I wonder if he was starting to get banged up his last year at UCLA.
He did miss 3 more games at least. So yeah.
Those UCLA teams also had the problem we talk about with college numbers, which is that if your teams are so loaded with good players, even Bill Walton can't get enough shots up.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. But anyway, I mean, yeah, I think it's interesting. Like when we consider the NCAA as a minor league, older players are certainly going. Like, so you're right, Brian. Like he might get first ballot Hall of Fame because he, those Bruins teams, as I think you California folk are probably fans, quite good, right? Was that Wooden?
John Wooden.
Yeah. John Wooden.
And however many titles, but
handing out cars to all his best players, right? That's how you get the job done.
Interesting. Is that what was happening? So there was pay to play.
I'm joking, but yeah, I mean, John Wooden has been accused of pay to play.
And more power. It's funny. It actually doesn't diminish my respect. I'm like,
yeah,
more power to him. Like, give those plays, like all the NBA players that played for him. Anything else you want to end up with on Bill Walton? That was just an excuse. So by the way, that's at nerdnumbers.substack.com. I've been aiming for Tuesdays to get those out. And, ever topical, I did Bill Walton, but of course it was related to the NBA 75th anniversary team. But I'm hoping to maybe do Melo next. Melo, I've got a lot of thoughts on.
Let's do Melo.
Anyway, but any thoughts, Jeremy? And then other than that, we'll get to the Warriors. We'll get to the meat and potatoes.
I don't know. I think the interesting kind of point is I'm a big fan of all the super productive players who don't get enough minutes because they're just not recognized by their coaches. It's interesting to think about a guy who just kept getting injured, right? And I kind of feel for Walton. So, I mean, I don't know. He'd be a candidate for me for sure. I think I'd just be more methodical. It'd be more about who am I going to bump him with, right? I haven't tried to rank them, but I think there's a decent chance he would have a shot in there for sure. So I'm not as bugged about it. Although I am bugged, like you're saying. It bothers me to no end that anybody remotely like Bill Walton or Wes Unseld or Nate Thurman is not going to get votes today. Like you said, Gobert, not gonna. He's not even going to be included.
Even
right?
Dwight Howard got snubbed.
Dwight Howard. Oh my God, Dwight Howard. Yeah,
Well,
that's
that
stupid.
I got some love for that tweet where I noted there are a grand total of 4 players in NBA history with 3 or more Defensive Player of the Year awards. And we hear defense matters, right? This was one of the only digs I heard against James Harden and Nikola Jokic for MVP is, but what about their defense? Their defense. 4 players have 3+ Defensive Player of the Year awards. None of them made the 75, and that is egregious.
Yeah.
Not putting Dikembe or Ben Wallace, and I mean that's the same thing. Ben Wallace didn't make first ballot to the Hall of Fame. Ben Wallace didn't make the 75, and it's just like, at this point, it's like you're saying, just the roll your eyes, get depressed, Jeremy. It happens.
Yeah, it's frustrating. It really is.
One subtle dig I get to bring is looking over the 70s. The 70s were among the most fair the NBA was. I explained why. It was because there was the ABA in contention. Now, I was a little annoyed for a brief second, Jeremy, which was I come to 1976 and I'm like, this league is so fair. There are no powerhouse teams. 1976, though, there's this 59-win team, 6 plus 6 SRS, which I think is like
Defending champs.
They were the defending champions, plus 6 SRS, like dominant against the rest of the league. I mean, the Celtics were a good team. I think there were 54 wins and a 4 SRS. But this team, I'm going to name them in just a second, was like, oh my God, you're ruining my thesis of parity in the NBA in the 70s. But then they fall to the 42-40 win Phoenix Suns in the second round of the playoffs. I don't know what it is. Apparently, years that end in 6, the Warriors are cursed because I am talking about the 1976 Golden State Warriors. And speaking of which, though, things have maybe turned a corner, right? Because the Warriors look to be back. They are now 4-0 as of tonight. Looked a little touch and go at the beginning there. They were down in the first half to the Oklahoma City Thunder, which the tea leaves are saying might be tanking, is what people are positing. Because I think the is it still Presti in charge of OKC?
Yep, they've got 35 draft picks in the next few years or something like that.
I was going to say he read something that said if you get every draft pick in a draft, you win, I guess. So that's what he's going after. They were in trouble, but they did end up winning. And there's some very good news for this squad, but I definitely wanted to hear what the Warriors fans had to say, particularly Jeremy. We kind of use you as a punching bag, but it frustrates me because you're very Callisto. Am I using the right one? Greek mythology, like the person that speaks the truth, but then the gods mess with so no one listens to her. I think I'm
Cassandra.
Cassandra, not Callisto. Cassandra.
Yeah.
Where I think you've had very good reads on the Warriors. And I mentioned all 3 of us have done this. So as a reminder to those that don't know, Jeremy wrote 2 pieces back to back. One said, the Warriors look great. They're going to win 50+ wins because they pick up David Lee. David Lee's arm then almost gets bitten off. He doesn't quite come back. The Warriors are in the tank for the next 2 seasons. What a fool. Then they pick up Bob Myers, and Bob Myers says all the trite cliche stuff, which turns out to be to the Warriors' favor in that he, unlike, say, Sam Hinkie, he doesn't piss off any stars, which is actually a useful skill. But beyond that, you say, if we look at the roster, the Warriors aren't going anywhere. Why are we optimistic about the future? And then let's be clear. Again, this is definitely God's messing with you. 3 finals MVPs, essentially, between Andre Iguodala and Kevin Durant knock over the door to get onto the squad. So it's not even a matter of they're like, hey, we'd like to play for you. Yeah. That's great. They're like, we'd like to play for you. And the Warriors like, no, thank you. And then they're like, our agent said we can if you do this. And like, oh, okay, I guess so. So you've had that. Brian, as I'm picking on everybody. Brian, the Warriors against the Rockets, you basically said their title window was shut, and then God's messed with you. Chris Paul goes down injured.
Yep.
The Houston Rockets shoot astronomically bad, so the Warriors go on to win a title. And then I got to come up the next season when they picked up DeMarcus Cousins and say everybody thinks it's broken and they're going to win a title, but there are way too many cracks in that squad and reasons they could lose. And thank goodness one of us finally got to be right. So we've got some Warriors prognosticators here, but I'll start. So like, how are you feeling? What are your thoughts, Jeremy, on the Warriors going into this season? And I'm going to maybe have Vegas open to maybe,
oh my God,
maybe ask the opposite. You never know.
I know I should. It's clearly I should assume they're going to do like last year. They're going to barely break 500. They're going to struggle from here on out. That's how this is going to go. That's what I should say, right? Because it's going to go the other way.
I remember last year what was messed up for me is I basically noted, I think it was what Kelly Oubre Jr. and James Wiseman were killing him.
Mm-hmm.
And I basically said, I said they actually have a good squad if they could just bench these players. And I was like, there's no way they're going to bench their number 2 draft pick, and there's no way they're going to bench the guy that they just. Yeah. You knew the number, right, Brian? I think with tax
something like 30 million or maybe more than that. It was a lot.
It was like it was a $50 million contract. But you told me, Brian, you're like, no, I'm agreeing with your fact, because you're telling me it was a case where it's like 15 million on paper, but Warriors fans like you and Jeremy knew, this is a $30 million contract, and if a GM spends 30 million on a player, they're playing that player.
Yeah.
Both of them got injured though, and the Warriors almost made the playoffs. And it was
Oubre was maybe injured at the end of the year, but he still kind of got benched. Like they ran out of patience with him. Wiseman was legitimately hurt.
Yeah.
And then Oubre, I think, am I mistaken? Was he looking halfway decent at the start of this year? I can completely have spaced.
I saw him really cough one up during the Hornets' first loss. Yeah. They started out like 2-0 or 3-0, and then lost one at the end. But
he's a little piece of kryptonite strapped to LaMelo's side.
Yeah, and I apologize. I apologize. He's worse this season, easily worse, and he's worse at an easier position. They're playing him at shooting guard, or they're playing him at small forward, and we're saying we're downgrading him on that squad based on side. So even with that on his side, he's still bad.
See, this is how the Warriors fans are getting revenge on the Hornets for getting LaMelo instead of Wiseman. We sent Oubre over there to sabotage LaMelo.
If we could send him Kuminga next, that'd be great.
Well, he's hurt now too.
I know. Well, what I love, so that Dre's mentioning this, like last year, I remember I was on a walk and he's trying to give me a pep talk, like, I'm going to write this post about how you got a good team, you got these other, and I was like, Dre kind of peripherally, kind of just pays just enough attention to the Warriors, go, you got these bench players, and he means Damian Lee and Juan Anderson. You got a unit, you got 4 or 5 good players. If you could just play them, and then what ends up happening is, they ended the year on this We Believe like run, right?
Yep.
It was like 15-5, like end of season run, which is kind of what they did in that We Believe season when they ended up knocking off Dallas. Of course, they lost the play-in, which was a bummer. But you looked at like what they did at the end of last year in the 15-5 run, and you're like, well, what do you have to build on there? And it was Curry recovered from that tailbone injury everybody forgot he had, and then he just got healthy and he got hot again and he just went off, right? And then you had Oubre out, which injured and maybe benched, and then Wiseman out, and then Juan Anderson, Damian Lee, just like Dre's article, just swooped in, started getting minutes. I think Damian Lee, like halfway through that run, got COVID, which sucked. But then Jordan Poole came on again and had one of his little runs and kind of offset some of that, and they just looked great. And it's like, okay, don't play Kelly Oubre, check. He's not on the team anymore. Steph Curry healthy, still red hot, looking good there. And then they haven't played Wiseman yet. He'd be an interesting guy to talk about. But then Damian Lee looks like he's in the rotation, and hopefully Juan Toscano is too. So those guys are part of the the strength in numbers, right? I mean, I think they're a really underrated part of it. And if those guys are getting minutes, they're definitely building on what they had at the end of the season run. So that's been good to see.
And I was going to say, this is a really weird one. You two would know better than me. I want to briefly just mention any analytics site, even apparently the ones that are fully staffed and have people paid to do this. Any analytics site at the start of the season just is going to have growing pains with numbers looking weird or positions looking off or whatever. We have an algorithmic way of placing people's minutes on squads. So if a player gets traded in and is mislabeled for a game as a shooting guard when they're a small forward, or the team plays them different. So Otto Porter, he's not getting as many minutes as I would like. He's about 18 minutes a game. I didn't look how many he got tonight. He's only looking average, but that's because basically we're calling him a center right now because he's listed as a power forward, and outside of Bielitsa, I think I got the pronunciation right.
Yeah,
they don't really have an official center. So
well, Looney's the starting center. He's healthy right now and starting.
So Kevon Looney is listed as a 5.
Yep.
Bielitsa is listed as a power forward, but we're making him a 5, and then you still don't have enough center minutes even with those two. So Otto Porter is getting bumped to a center just because just so people are aware the way our algorithm works. It's probably Draymond Green, the real center.
Yep.
But what's happening is Otto Porter is actually bigger than Draymond Green on paper. So our automated system says if you've got to pick a center, Otto Porter's bigger than Draymond Lee. So that's what's happening. He still looks good. So I mean, you all picked up Otto Porter Jr., which is very good. Gary Payton's just kind of a black box in that I think he's been good in the past, but
he's never gotten any minutes. He's got like under 100 minutes in his career.
And I mean, he had his last few years. He hasn't had many minutes, but he's been really productive though.
Yeah.
Like Steph Curry productive, which is weird, but I'm the fact that I think the Warrior one of the big gaps that nobody talked about in the offseason was that the backup point guard for the Warriors was a hot mess. Like Curry came out and it was just a disaster. And I think they might have accidentally fixed it with Iguodala, and they flirted with Avery Bradley and dodged a bullet there and got GP2. So they might have accidentally fixed that unit. Although they brought up Chiozza tonight, which isn't hopeful. So
Chiozza's got a nickname now that I like. His nickname is Evil Curry. And the reason for that is he actually looks like Steph Curry, but kind of a shorter version. He has the same hair and the same goatee. So people are calling him Evil Curry.
And he's like the opposite in terms of productivity too. So there you go.
Yeah, he's like a point guard that's 6 foot or smaller that doesn't really shoot. Like, I don't know what kind of guys like that are doing in the NBA these days.
He's like an assists guy, but he doesn't really seem to do anything else.
It was jarring to watch him play, right? He looks like an old school, an old school point guard that just distributes the ball.
Yeah.
It's kind of fun to watch, but I don't think it's someone that's gonna win a lot of games. I want to agree on the Andre Iguodala point though. Boy, he looks good. He has missed one game with an injury already, but he looks like his old self, and he just looks like he can turn it on when he wants to, and he looks like he could be a top 5 guy on a finishing roster on a playoff team. Like, he looks great.
He rolled back the clock like 3 or 4 years.
Yep.
He slipped on a sweat spot, which sucks.
Yeah.
He went down hard, so I can't blame him. I'm not going to chalk that up to age. I'd take anybody out, but yeah, he looks great. That's huge. That's a huge pickup if he does that. So
he's reminding me a lot of Manu Ginobili, who is this guy should have made the NBA 75 list. I don't believe he did. Which whatever.
That's a scam.
Again, I don't get it. But Andre Iguodala reminds me of that, where like Manu Ginobili was getting old, and I was like, I love this guy, but were they really wise to re-sign him? And Manu Ginobili ended his career such that, barring one injury-plagued season, you could never say he wasn't worth the contract, which is wild, because even great players, LeBron James, I guarantee you, is going to hit a season where he is overpaid by like $30 million. And he may hit a Kobe like era where he's overpaid by like $100 million over the course of his contract when all is said and done. If he signs like a 3-year deal for 150 or something, and after year 1 is done. So I could definitely see that happening. But Manu Ginobili was always worth the money. And Andre Iguodala is this guy that, I remember you and I, Brian, we kept having this back and forth where I was like, I love Andre Iguodala. He's one of the 2 NBA jerseys I own. I own an Andre Iguodala powder blue Denver Nuggets jersey from when he played here. I own a Dikembe Mutombo throwback, the Mile High jersey. Those are the 2 jerseys I own. Tried to get the Andre Iguodala jersey signed, could not. One of my favorites, he's what started me blogging about basketball stats. I used to write fan letters to a writer about how Andre Iguodala needed to join the Denver Nuggets so we could win a title. I thought he could be finals MVP. I thought he could lead the Nuggets. I was mostly right. Over 2 seasons, I was correct. But I kept thinking he was going to fall apart, and I kept saying it to you, and you kept saying he's going to be better. And I think your fun claim to fame, which came true, is you said Andre Iguodala was going to have a better season than D'Angelo Russell. And that was back when you guys had D'Angelo Russell instead of Andrew Wiggins. And the good news, I think, is Andrew Wiggins is fine.
Yeah.
He's fine. He is.
Because I'm in denial about Andrew Wiggins, can I just say, I want to say, I think Iguodala forcing his way onto the Warriors, which is one of your points earlier, like he absolutely did force his way onto the Warriors team. If you look at that title run, those 5 years they won the Western Conference, he is the single consistent new piece that elevated them. Like it was him and Bogut at first, but then Bogut tailed off and got
Yep.
traded. But like Iguodala is, I think he's the MVP of the Warriors title run. Like
Oh,
totally unsung. I
Well, no, for me, he's the top
setting
three.
aside Curry, but he was the key piece who really lifted the unit overall and put him over the top as like the best team.
Here's the simplest way to put it: it's not Steph, Clay, and Draymond. It's Steph, Andre, and KD. It was those three, and Bogut.
Yeah.
If you want to throw Bogut in there,
Yep.
Draymond and Clay just didn't play as big a role, unfortunately. As much as we love watching him.
And early on, I would say it was Steph, Iggy, and Draymond. So
Yep.
actually, no, I'm sorry. I would put Bogut ahead of even Draymond there.
Draymond in 2016, albeit they didn't win, was I think the best power forward in the league. He had this absurd, like that was his, that was an outlier season. He was amazing. He had the best finals. He put up the best game of the finals in Game 7, where, you know, it took LeBron James blocking Andre Iguodala and Kyrie Irving shooting off a flat earth and making this dagger three.
Is that what happened on that play?
Apparently, those two plays back to back. So yeah,
he did nut tap LeBron in that series though. So
yeah,
that was a little hard to. That's hard to continue rooting for him after. But it was like, but yeah, he had an amazing year other than that.
And I mean, but I mean, I will say that's the rough part here is Andrew Wiggins is playing fine, which was needed. But what annoys me is he's still not worth the money.
Yeah.
Which means you are still beholden to young players or underplayed players like Otto Porter. So you're kind of lucky in that regard. I really wonder what's he's got 2 years left on his deal, so he's tradable.
Yeah.
Beyond, and I think he did he get vaccinated, if I recall?
Yes.
Yeah.
He'll probably get traded this offseason, but we'll see.
We won't start the Ben Simmons thing again, but
if the window had been open,
I would actually argue. So you're talking about placing a position earlier, and so Wiggins, it sure seemed like, I think you guys, Boxscore Geeks and Basketball Reference, both agreed he played most of his minutes last year at power forward.
Yeah,
but you would expect if a guy, you know, played closer, played a big man role or something, he would probably do like Jeff Green or somebody did, which is, you know, lift his rebound, shoot a little closer. He didn't. He was just the same. He had one of his best years, but like he was playing out of position.
He did the shot blocking though last year.
He did the shot blocking, yeah. Although less steals, right? So like he was less on the perimeter, but more shot block. But like, well, I think the keys to this year is when they added Bjelica and even Porter and Looney, hopefully healthy, is it's pushing him back out of the big role, back onto the perimeter where he's not going to hurt him as much. And if he can repeat roughly last season, they're going to be in. I mean, it's kind of the point he's approaching like an average player, right? And you're like, okay, he's not worth the money, but he's not killing you.
Yeah, he's great on defense.
That would be my hope for this year, is that they're actually getting a bit of like couple wins lift just from him not playing power forward. So
the funny thing about it is he started the year playing shooting guard. And they're like, we're not going to move you to small forward. We're moving you to power forward. Because why not?
Works if you're KD when you're 7 feet tall, but not him. So, although he did do some post ups tonight. So, but that OKC team sure looks small.
21 points on 17 shots. That's what you want.
He had a nice game. 9 for 17.
Yeah, it was all right.
I still don't like watching him, though. He's just a ball stopper on offense, right?
Yeah,
like
really
last year, there was all these ball stoppers. You're like, I just don't want to watch this offense. Now it's like, wow, this offense looks like it used to. The ball's moving around. We're penetrating, looking for drivers and kicking and all that. And then Wiggins is like, I've got the ball. Time to ISO, baby.
He's trying to do the KD thing.
The good news. The good news I will give you, and so I'm stealing a note you have on the script, Jeremy, is you say you got him around. You've got him as a plus 50 win team. I'll say a really hard part about predicting NBA wins is, first off, right, all it takes is 5 missed games to Curry, and that could knock you 2 or 3 wins.
Sure.
But I mean, if we're just kind of placing them in strata, you've got them as a plus 50 win team, and the good news is, I think if they play the right playoff rotation, this is a squad that can upset in the playoffs. And I think that's what I told you. I think I told you I predicted them as like a 52-win team that was going to get to the second round and be set to upset. I think it was my call for the year.
Yeah.
So that's a good spot to be in. It's the only frustrating part for us as fans, and this gets us back to me, you know, the joke about our predictions is, what has been rough about the box score geeks is that I think our analysis has been sound, but then success makes people ignore things. And it's always frustrating as a fan when you go, if you had just done a few things more, it could have been even better.
Oh yeah.
And that's really hard for the Warriors, right? Because when you're winning 70, when you're a plus 10 SRS team winning close to 70 wins back-to-back seasons, that's actually really hard to optimize. But where they failed was that they couldn't sustain it.
Yeah.
Now that they're a 50-win squad, there is tons to optimize there, and it's frustrating for them not to. And it is frustrating for your billionaire owner to basically justify Wiggins as, well, we needed to trade for him so I could get below the salary cap. Which, that's what I want to hear.
Well, I would say, like, in that, I know I'd shared that before. I think you shared that on maybe one of the talks with Chris Ye too. But I was projecting about like a 54-win team, I think, just before the start of the season, and I tried to be really pessimistic. I mean, maybe not with Curry. If Curry goes down, obviously all bets are off. They lose games pretty quickly. But like, I'm pretty pessimistic at like distributing injuries. The only thing, like, most players, I don't think I have playing more than 60 to 65 games, because a lot of them actually don't play more than that. A lot. Damian Lee will miss games. Juan Toscano missed games. Iguodala misses a lot of games if you look at their last few seasons. So I tried to kind of peg it like that. I think the only optimistic things I have in there are that Bjelica and Otto Porter would play about 60 games, or maybe 60, 70 games, and kind of return to some of their previous form, not be just totally banged up. And then my other reason for optimism is if James Wiseman gets minutes, which I'm pretty convinced, even what their analytics department says this is the right thing to do, right? If he gets minutes this year, he was so bad last year. It was such a raw young player. If he gets minutes and improves to merely bad, they pick up like 4 or 5 wins right there. So like I'm fairly optimistic that he will be merely bad, and they'll get a little bit of bump from that. So I actually think the team even has a bit more upside than the 54 wins, but I'm kind of counting on, something going wrong. So like Kuminga getting minutes or something.
Ooh.
Like that would not be great. So
I was less optimistic than you both were heading into the season, but now that we're here and they're 4-0, I'm like, 54 looks pretty good. That 4-win head start is nice. I think the big thing is they just have so much more depth now than they have the last 2 years, more like they did during their run, their big run. They don't have the stars like they did during their huge run, but they have the depth, and that depth will do well for them in the regular season, as long as the injuries don't get there. But yeah, they could put together a playoff roster as well and make a run. I'm just not optimistic it's going to be more than, maybe a first-round exit, maybe second round, but we'll see.
Well, I'll just add, I think the key, if you looked at him from like a team skill level standpoint, nobody talked about this enough, but they were god awful rebounding team last year.
Yes,
they were last in offensive rebounding by like a mile. It was really, and they were almost one of the worst on defensive.
And they're winning rebounding every game this year so far, I think.
Yeah, so that's I think probably, they added people like Porter and Bjelica and Iguodala, guys who can shoot still, so they didn't lose on shooting, they didn't lose on defense. They're savvy vets, so they don't foul a lot like Bazemore did, but they can rebound. And if they close that rebounding gap, I think that's really the number one thing from like a skill standpoint. That's the difference between last year and this year. So I'm pretty optimistic because of the early returns on that's going to be like stable and the whole, but we'll see.
I'm sad to hear you're not optimistic, Brian. I will say the other.
No, I think I am being optimistic, at least for me. I mean,
I'll say the fun, misleading thing is I looked at their opening schedule is pretty soft.
Yeah.
Yes. This continues for at least another 5-10 games. So, I mean, there's also some good news there, which I've seen before, which is if you play your easy games early in the season, that is nice because injuries later in this, like this used to happen with the Warriors to the Nuggets, Brian. This would drive me nuts, which would be like Curry and Clay and Iguodala would get injured, and the Warriors would go on a losing streak for 2 games to like the Houston Rockets and the Lakers.
Yeah. And
then they come back healthy and play the Nuggets and win by like 5 points. So the Nuggets lose a game in the standings, and I'm like, what the hell is this? So the good news for you is that if you play your easy teams early in the season when your team's decently healthy and other teams are as well, later in the season, teams might, the Warriors might luck into some wins that they might not otherwise have gotten if, Nikola Jokic is out, which is the case. I'm kind of curious. I want to check in. Oh, well, it happens. Jokic got injured this game, and the Utah
Damn.
Jazz are up by 10 in the fourth, so is what it is.
Sorry.
And yeah, he 8 for 9 shooting, 24 points in the first half. Fine,
That sucks.
fine.
He's just
But,
played so many minutes, Dre, in the the postseasons, all those like extra overtime games, the postseason, international play, or no? Did he sit out international? I think he sat
I think
out.
he got some flack from Serbia for doing that.
Okay,
Yeah, I
okay.
believe that's the case.
Well, he was right to
But-
sit out.
But anyway, agreeing to that point, right? The Nuggets might be banged. The Nuggets will be banged up because that's been their MO the last couple of seasons late in the season. So the Warriors are probably in good shape. They're probably going to be a bit of a mirage for a bit, but the good news is you can't take wins off the scoreboard. Even if it's an easy win, it's there, and that's key.
I'm an eye test person these days, Dre. So I've been watching the Warriors, and they look great. Here's one thing I will say, though, in all seriousness, the Clippers, who they beat pretty well, actually do look really good, even without Kawhi. So that's the one quality win they have so far. Lakers, I'm not going to count. They're kind of a hot mess so far, but we'll see.
I was going to say, isn't Kawhi's out indefinitely, or am I mistaken? Unless something changed.
They haven't announced he'll come back this year, I guess. They keep casting some doubt on that, but yeah, I'd say to Brian's pessimism on the Warriors, that might be a little bit prescient though, because if you look at it, they do have the soft schedule, so the schedule is going to get tougher. They have the opposite problem, which is three guys are going to come back from injury, and it's not clear they're going to help, right? So Clay, we don't know what we're going to get. I mean, those are serious injuries. He's been off for a while, and I like how they're taking it easy with him. So maybe he comes back right where he was, and he's no worse than Poole, and he just slots right in there. But what if Wiseman? I mean, Wiseman, I'm hoping is not as bad as last year. He's training with Jokic's old coach, right?
Right.
And then what if Kuminga gets minutes, right? Kuminga is not ready for prime time, and guys like that. And if Wiseman's not ready and Clay isn't there, all they have to do is replace minutes of Iguodala and Looney and Bielicha and things like that. And the Warriors are suddenly in a tougher schedule, looking at, hey, why are we 6-4 or 5-5 the last 10 games? Well, because those guys are back, right? And so it could be, like you said, they might be a bit of a mirage right now, and they could really swing a bit the other way once those guys get back. So,
but I'm gonna fake myself and leave faith in the savvy analytics department, which has not let me down with the likes of the Mavericks, man. I don't know, Brian. I think we were just tired and couldn't even keep track of what was going on. But I don't even know what the hell happened there this last season.
Yeah, they got to win tonight.
Oh, they did? Wow, not bad. Because I heard people beating up on them for saying it was so obvious to take. I think they were at 48.5, and I think people were saying the under was one of the easiest bets ever. Now, of course, they could probably use an outside shooter like Seth Curry, who is looking. That's one funny thing. I'll lead us into our last segment, then we can wrap up.
Yeah,
I was going to call it small sample size theater, which is I'll let each of us do 2 or 3 funny things we're just noticing, because these aren't real stories. Some of these will change, won't stay consistent. But the fun example right now is Steph Curry is so hot right now, Brian, but you know who he's not? He's not Seth Curry.
Oh, yeah.
Seth Curry on a permanent basis is a better player right now than Steph Curry, and he is playing amazing. Now it looks like, unfortunately, did go on a bit of a cold stretch tonight, only 2 for 6 shooting. So Steph Curry might leapfrog him, but Seth Curry,
in all seriousness, is not the player that Steph is. However, since Seth has been getting starters minutes, his shooting from 3 has been at times equal to or better than Steph. Like, as a shooter, he is really good.
So good. The Warriors should have never given him up, man.
Yeah, I was so disappointed about that. They could have the 3 brothers backcourt. They could have Steph, Seth, and Damian. Come on. Be so great.
I remember they had him here. I live in Santa Cruz where their G League team played.
Right.
He was fun to watch, and then he went up. I'm like, this is great. And then they just let him go. It's like, what are you doing?
Another
Sad.
Jeremy Lin.
Yeah, another Jeremy Lin.
I was going to say, so Jeremy, you got a small sample size theater you'd like to throw out. I'll let us each get 2, and then I'll lead us to
Wait, did you just did, okay, you did Seth Curry. I thought you were going to do Harrison Barnes. I'll go Alex Caruso. Man, what is he? He's getting like playing 20 minutes and get 4 or 5 steals a game. It's crazy. He looks pretty good in Chicago.
Bulls
I was
are
going to say,
undefeated, right?
with Lonzo Ball, I was going to say basically the mini Lakers have turned the Chicago Bulls into a major squad. I love
Zach
that.
LaVine too, though. LaVine looks very good.
Where the heck did he come from? Because he used to be one of our
punching bags. He did this
bags.
last year, though,
Yeah.
and he tailed off the last half of the year. Though.
Last year is when he took the step, I think.
Yeah. We'll see
All
how
right,
he
you-
keeps it up. It'd be
Gonna
fun to
say-
see him do that, though. Yeah, it's fun seeing Chicago do that. It's great.
You got one, Brian?
Yeah, well, can I take a team? Does that count?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
The Cavaliers are the team I'm looking at the most. Going into the season, we're like, whoa, they're doing a legitimate Twin Towers. They're going to give this big deal to Jarrett Allen, who we
Triple
love.
Towers.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm getting to, right? And then they end up drafting Mobley, who, of course, he was my favorite player in the draft, right? The next Kevin Garnett, 7-foot defender. And then they're like, no, that's not enough. We're not going to go with Okoro at small forward or even Larry Nance. They trade Larry Nance. We're going to put Markin in there, 7-foot, 240, 3 centers. It's unbelievable. And I'm seeing some coach types saying, this isn't going as bad as we thought it would. But they should just start Okoro and do a legitimate big team, not a super big team. But even still, I love it. Ricky Rubio is there as well, still looking good, a little bit older. So we'll see how the Cavaliers go. They have not looked bad so far, and they've gotten a few wins.
Nice.
That's a great one.
I'm going to go back to my Warriors roots. Jeremy knocked this. Harrison Barnes right now. He was briefly the MVP in front of Kevin Durant with 4 games played on Boxscore Geeks. As of this recording, it'll change tonight probably, as the number 1 player in the league. But Harrison Barnes, so basically the small forward, power forward position on the Warriors, both of whom you lost.
Yeah,
So hot right now.
that's awesome.
Barnes
I
is
was
shooting
gonna-
55% from 3, so that's a big. But anyway, go ahead, Jeremy.
He's looking amazing. I was going to say, Brian, to your point on Cleveland, I would love to see them roll out a lineup with like Kevin Love at point and Taco Fall.
They do have Taco Fall. Yeah, Kevin Love's coming off the bench. Like, he's one of the smallest guys on the team.
That would be fantastic. And then they need to trade for Bol Bol too. And then
Hey,
Yep.
back off.
Back off, Bobo.
All right.
That's
One more
awesome.
out of you, Jeremy. One more out of you, Brian. And that'll be the show.
oh, another small sample. Oh God. You go, Brian.
All right, let's see. Who do we got here?
Who
All
do
right,
I-
this is one people are talking about a lot, so I'll just put a pin on it here. Miles Bridges. I was on the 2 Bridges. I was on McCall Bridges. I thought that contract that Phoenix gave him was very team friendly, and he's a great, great player. But Miles is looking like the better Bridges so far. And despite Oubre, the Hornets are looking okay with with LaMelo and with Miles Bridges. Although I think the 3rd Ball brother got cut by the Hornets, or who was he on? So one of these teams did not have the 3rd Ball brother get on.
It's a shame. I was going to say, apologies to steal a brief Ted Lasso moment. This made me think of a line which has been stuck in my head. So this last season, Roy Kent and Jamie Tart get in a fight, and Jamie Tart says, "I'm trying to build bridges," and Roy Kent says, "You couldn't build Jeff Bridges," and I don't know what that means, and it routinely pops up in my head, and like I if I ever get a chance to talk to any of the writers, I want to be like, what does that mean? And then that popped into my head when you're bringing up all the different bridges. You're saying, I'm going to go with this Bridges and that Bridges. And I was like, you couldn't build Jeff Bridges was the thought in my head. And because I still have no idea what that means, despite that
As long as
show.
it's got Jeff Bridges in there, you're good to go.
Yep.
No, fair enough. Yeah. And you gotta love the dude.
I'm gonna
That's
go. My small sample, my last one I'll add, just because I can't resist bringing him up, is Robert Williams III, who's
Yes.
not playing well for Robert Williams III, but is still the 10th most productive player in basketball.
It looks
That
like
guy
he's
is-
getting closing minutes now too. They're giving him more
is
minutes.
he- yeah, I think he's poised for a bit of a breakout. So
The Time Lord, just teleporting into the
Time Lord.
future.
But yeah, to your point, didn't crack 500 minutes is for we love these players, and this is like the Bill Walton point back in the beginning. It's like
he's the
Okay.
best player in the league.
this guy
He really
well,
is.
well, he's actually playing, like you were saying, he's actually, at least according to our numbers, he's playing poorly for his
Yeah, That's what
but
I'm
he's
saying.
but he's getting minutes. So
Yeah.
I don't know if I want to stay optimistic. And the question is, Celtics are a 500 win team. In
I hope you
part-
mean 500 winning percentage. 500 wins. That would be impressive.
Oh yeah, that would be a lot. Yeah, It'd be like a
Well,
baseball
I
season.
noticed they were putting him. They slid him to power forward next to Horford. I think that's probably having some impact on him. But
Interesting.
Two towers.
I can keep in the faith. He's fantastic.
I don't know what that, to that point, the flip side, I don't know what the heck's going on with Jason Tatum. He's playing terribly. And this is a guy that,
Yeah.
you know, he's flirted with, in our opinions, being a star in terms of production, was a potential, you know, I think actually it's kind of funny. He hasn't really hit his rookie of the year numbers. He was a good contender. If you didn't want to count Ben Simmons as a true rookie, Jason Tatum would have been our rookie of the year. He's been productive, but not great. And I don't know. I mean, I
He's
can't
just
buy he's
shooting
going to stay
bricks.
there.
He's just not shooting so far.
Yeah.
So that'll
I will say the Celtics' best front court, though, it's both Williams. You go with Robert and Grant.
Yeah.
That's how you get it done.
Williams.
sure.
Yep. Yeah, that's true. That's a 2-star. And actually, that's like the only bright spot. The only other above average player on the Celtics as of, I don't know if they played tonight, but the only other above average player is Jabari Parker in 17 minutes. And I don't believe you. I refuse to believe that 81.2% true shooting Jabari Parker is for real. I am happy to be proven wrong.
I think they have Enes Kanter again, but they're not playing him. They should put him with Robert Williams.
That would work.
And that's turned weird. I don't. He's been doing weird stuff against Nike on Twitter. I don't know what's going on there. So it's yeah.
Oh, what is Nike Pro Erdogan or something? What's going on here?
I have no idea. And COVID has made me so sick of this stupid league. I really don't want to care about what players think about. And COVID blew that up, but we managed to make it through almost all of the show without me bringing.
Yeah, we didn't have Nets on the script, so I'm happy about that.
I was going to ask if he was going to be the Sam from Ted Lasso. Maybe, who knows? I don't know what the issue is he has with Nike, but.
Oh yeah, you can't take on, I don't know, in the NBA taking on Nike, that's a little bigger than just one single sponsor.
Probably.
All right, well that has been a good. I mean, it took us over an hour, so that's been good. I was going to say I'm going to call small sample size theater the equivalent of our shout outs, unless either of you have anything beyond that. I'll lead us out. So
shout out
Jeremy,
to the two of you.
Oh, thank you, Jeremy. Anything to end on?
Shout out to Jalen Suggs. He'll get it together eventually.
Yeah, Jalen Suggs.
All right. Anyway, that has been the Boxscore Geeks show. We're back, apparently, and I'm going to have to write a post now, Brian. If you found us not through our website, you can find us at boxscoregeeks.com. We go live sometimes on twitch.tv/nerd numbers. Other times it's me playing Zelda 2. Pretty decent at it now, so that's fun. We do actually have an episode coming out next week. I will be interviewing Ben Guest about his upcoming book on basketball. And I didn't have the title in front of me. I didn't want to muck it up. So Ben Guest, B Guest on Twitter, look that up. And there's a fantastic interview coming up. And the numbers are live on Boxscore Geeks. So look forward to that. I've been your host, Dre Alvarez, a.k.a. Nerd Numbers. Brian Foster, you can find on Twitter as Boxscore Brian. Jeremy Britton, anything you want to plug where you want to be found?
Not at all.
So Jeremy Britton, who you may know from, if you go, actually, so here's the rough part. I bugged Dave about this. So I think the Wages of Wins site, I think, is down. Dave's the webmaster. Dave has all the logins. So if you want to know about Wages of Wins, go bug Dave. I've already done it, and that's as far as we'll go.
I have all my links up on my website, though. That's true. Although I guess they resolve to nothing on Wages of Wins. You're right.
But I was going to say, you can go to the Wayback Machine, type in wagesofwins.com. On the Wayback Machine, you can use the search function and search for Jeremy Britton and find some fantastic Golden State Warriors pieces on the Wayback Machine version of Wages of Wins. So that's how you can find Jeremy.
Talking trash to Mark Cuban in 2011.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah, still no repercussions.
In arguments with Lacob, yeah.
Yeah, and we're never going to get told we're right because it's like, yeah, you luck into an MVP. All right, anyway, somber note to end us on, Brian. Thanks. We'll see you, hopefully not in as long as it takes Ben Simmons to get resolved.